Have you ever stood in a room where every eye judged you worthless, where laughter cut deeper than any blade, and your very presence became a joke whispered behind raised hands? This is a story about that searing humiliation, but it is also about something far more powerful: grace under fire. The quiet strength that comes from knowing your worth is not determined by those who mock you, and the miraculous ways the universe responds when humility meets genuine talent. What you are about to read may change how you view both failure and mercy. Wooden spoon in hand, stripped of worth. Daniel Whitmore had never imagined his mother's final gift would become the instrument of his greatest humiliation. The spoon was simple, worn smooth by decades of use, with a hairline crack running down its handle that his mother had wrapped with thin copper wire before the cancer took her voice, then her breath, then everything else. He kept it in the inner pocket of his jacket, close to his heart, a talisman against the noise of a world that moved too fast and cared too little. The letter from Pinnacle Culinary Studios had arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after he had submitted his application. Daniel had read it 7 times before believing it was real, his hands trembling so badly that the paper rustled like autumn leaves. An invitation to audition for the prestigious mentorship program under celebrity chef Victor Rousseau, the man whose restaurants held 12 Michelin stars between them, whose cookbook had sold 4 million copies, whose television shows made or destroyed careers with a single raised eyebrow. Daniel was 23 years old and had been cooking professionally for 5 years, ever since dropping out of community college when his mother's medical bills consumed everything. He had worked in diners where the grease never quite left your pores, in catering companies where you learned to smile through exhaustion, in small bistros where passion mattered more than profit. He had talent. Everyone said so. But talent without pedigree was like faith without works, his mother used to say, quoting scripture without quoting it, letting the truth speak for itself. The audition was scheduled for a Friday afternoon in November. Daniel took 3 buses to reach the studio, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in a part of the city where even the sidewalks looked expensive. He wore his only good shirt beneath a jacket that had been his father's, before his father decided that a family in rural Idaho was less interesting than whatever waited in Seattle. The shirt was pressed but old, the collar slightly frayed. His shoes were clean but worn at the heels. He carried his knife roll in a canvas bag his mother had sewn, her stitches neat and even, each one a small prayer. The lobby was all marble and minimalism. 27 other candidates waited, each one more polished than the last. Daniel recognized 3 from culinary school websites, 2 from cooking competition shows, 1 from a viral video about molecular gastronomy. They looked like they belonged here. Daniel looked like someone who had taken a wrong turn on the way to a church potluck. A woman with a tablet and a headset called them into groups of 4. Daniel found himself walking down a corridor with a tall woman named Victoria who spoke 4 languages and had trained in Paris, a stocky man named Raphael who specialized in avant-garde fusion, and a quiet person named Jordan whose father owned a restaurant chain. They made polite conversation. Daniel mostly listened, his hand unconsciously reaching for the wooden spoon in his pocket, touching the copper wire like a rosary. The kitchen where they would audition was larger than any Daniel had worked in. Stainless steel gleamed under bright lights. Copper pans hung in perfect rows above the central island. The equipment was state-of-the-art, every surface spotless, every tool precisely placed. It looked more like a laboratory than a place where food was made with love. Victor Rousseau entered without announcement, and the room's temperature seemed to drop. He was shorter than Daniel expected, perhaps 5 feet 9 inches, but he carried himself like a man accustomed to bending the world to his will. His chef's coat was pristine white, tailored to fit perfectly, and his dark hair was swept back from a face that was handsome in the way of men who have never doubted their own worth. He was in his early 40s, with the kind of confidence that comes from a decade of unquestioned success. 3 assistant chefs followed him, all wearing the same black aprons, all watching the candidates with expressions that ranged from bored to mildly amused. Daniel recognized the dynamic immediately. This was not just an audition. This was theater. "Good afternoon," Victor said, his accent carrying the faintest trace of French-Canadian origins, softened by years in American kitchens. "I am here to find one person worth my time. Based on what I see, I am not optimistic." Nervous laughter rippled through the group. Daniel did not laugh. "You will each prepare a single dish," Victor continued. "You have access to our pantry and equipment. You have 90 minutes. The dish should represent who you are as a cook. Try not to embarrass yourselves." He walked along the line of candidates, making brief eye contact with each. When he reached Daniel, he stopped. His gaze traveled from Daniel's worn shoes to his frayed collar to his canvas knife roll. "And you are?" Victor asked. "Daniel Whitmore, sir." "Where did you train, Daniel Whitmore?" "I did not attend culinary school, sir. I learned by working." Victor's eyebrow lifted slightly. "Self-taught. How quaint." Then he glanced at his assistants, and one of them, a lean man with a sharp nose and sharper expression, smiled. "And what do you plan to make for us today?" Daniel had thought about this for weeks. He had practiced the dish 7 times in his tiny apartment kitchen, each time trying to perfect the balance of flavors, the marriage of technique and heart. It was his mother's recipe, elevated, refined, but still carrying the soul of what she had taught him. "Braised short ribs with root vegetables and a red wine reduction, sir," Daniel said, "with fresh herb polenta and roasted garlic." The kitchen went quiet. Victoria, standing 2 people down, made a small sound that might have been a stifled laugh. Victor stared at Daniel for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "Braised short ribs," he said slowly, as if tasting each word. "How ambitious, how rustic, how utterly pedestrian." He turned to his assistants. "This is what happens when people without proper training think they can cook. They make truck-stop food and call it cuisine." The assistants laughed. So did several of the other candidates, quick, nervous sounds designed to align themselves with power. Daniel felt heat rise in his face, not quite anger, but something adjacent to it, a cousin to rage that tasted like bile. "Sir," Daniel began, but Victor raised a hand. "Do not waste my time explaining," Victor said. "Just try not to poison us. Time begins now." The candidates scattered to their stations. Daniel moved to the far end of the kitchen, claiming a workspace near the pantry. His hands shook as he unwrapped his knives, each one familiar and perfectly maintained, his most valuable possessions. He had to pause, close his eyes, breathe in through his nose and out through his mouth, the way his mother had taught him when the world became too loud. The short ribs were in the refrigerator, beautiful cuts of meat marbled with fat. He selected 3, checked their weight in his palm, approved. The vegetables were fresh, their colors vivid. He gathered carrots, parsnips, celery, onions, garlic. His movements became more certain as he worked, muscle memory taking over, the familiar rhythm of knife against cutting board creating a small island of calm. He seared the meat first, getting a perfect crust on each side. The scent filled his corner of the kitchen, rich and promising. He could hear Victoria working on something complex with scallops, Raphael cursing softly in Spanish as something went wrong with his emulsion. Jordan moved with mechanical precision, plating and replating practice portions. Daniel had just placed the short ribs in the oven when he felt a presence behind him. He turned to find Victor Rousseau, standing 3 feet away, arms crossed, watching with an expression of theatrical disappointment. "Do you know what separates a good cook from a great one, Daniel?" Victor asked, loud enough for others to hear. "Consistency, sir?" "No." Victor picked up Daniel's wooden spoon from where it lay beside the cutting board. He held it between thumb and forefinger as if it were contaminated. "Sophistication. A willingness to move beyond the comfort food that grandmother made. An understanding that cooking is art, not just fuel." He turned the spoon over, examining the copper wire, the worn handle. "Is this your equipment? This relic?" "It was my mother's, sir." "Was she a professional?" "No, sir, but she was an excellent cook." Victor made a humming sound, a note of profound skepticism. He set the spoon down, not gently. "There is a reason we do not use wooden utensils in serious kitchens, Daniel. They harbor bacteria. They are unsanitary. They are unprofessional." He looked around at the other candidates, ensuring he had an audience. "But perhaps that is the level you are accustomed to." Laughter again, louder this time. Daniel felt something crack inside his chest, not breaking but fracturing, the way ice fractures before it shatters. His hand moved toward the spoon, but Victor was faster, picking it up again. "Tell me," Victor said, "did your mother teach you anything actually useful? Or just how to make food that tastes like nostalgia and regret?" The kitchen went silent. Even the sounds of cooking seemed to pause. Daniel looked at Victor Rousseau, this man with his perfect coat and his 12 Michelin stars and his casual cruelty, and felt something ancient and powerful rise in his chest. It was not anger. It was something cleaner, sharper. It was the recognition of injustice, and beneath that, a deep well of sorrow for all the small ways people broke each other. "She taught me that food is love made visible," Daniel said quietly, "that every meal is a gift, that how we treat people in our kitchens matters as much as what we put on the plate." Victor stared at him. The moment stretched. Then Victor laughed, a short bark of sound without humor. "Love," he said. "How touching, how utterly useless in a professional kitchen." He tossed the wooden spoon back onto Daniel's cutting board, where it clattered and spun. 45 minutes remaining. Try to make something that does not taste like sentiment." He walked away. Daniel stood very still, his hands gripping the edge of the counter, his knuckles white. Around him, the other candidates had returned to their work, careful not to make eye contact, each one grateful they were not the target. Daniel wanted to leave. Every instinct told him to pack his knives, take his mother's spoon, walk out of this gleaming kitchen with its cruel master, and never look back. He had been mocked before, had faced skepticism and doubt, but this felt different. This felt personal and petty, designed not just to critique but to destroy. His hand found his jacket pocket. Inside, folded carefully, was something he had forgotten about. A letter. His mother had given it to him 3 days before she died, her handwriting already shaky from the medication, her words slow and considered. "For when you doubt," she had said, "for when the world is too much." He pulled it out now, unfolding it with fingers that still trembled. The paper was thin, worn from being carried and reread, but the words were clear. "My dearest Daniel, if you are reading this, you are probably standing somewhere that feels impossible. You are probably scared, or angry, or both. I wish I could be there to put my hand on your shoulder and remind you who you are. You are not defined by those who underestimate you. You are not measured by their mockery. You cook with your whole heart, and that is a rare and precious thing. Never apologize for that. Never make yourself small to fit their expectations. Remember the story of the young shepherd who faced the giant? Everyone saw a boy. The giant saw a joke. But the shepherd knew something they did not. The battle was already won, because he fought with something they could not comprehend. Fight with love, my son. Fight with kindness. Fight with the knowledge that your worth is not determined by those who cannot see it. I am so proud of you. I will always be proud of you. Make something beautiful." Daniel read it twice. The words hit differently now, here in this kitchen with its copper pans and casual cruelty. He folded the letter carefully, returned it to his pocket, and picked up his mother's wooden spoon. Then he went back to work. The short ribs emerged from the oven 90 minutes later, the meat falling tender from the bone, the sauce rich and deep with layers of flavor. The polenta was smooth and creamy, each bite carrying the subtle sweetness of corn and the sharp tang of aged parmesan. The vegetables were caramelized perfectly, their natural sugars brought forward by careful heat and patience. Daniel plated the dish simply, without flourish, letting the food speak for itself. He was the last to finish, taking extra time to ensure everything was exactly right. The other candidates had already presented their creations. Victoria's deconstructed bouillabaisse with foam and microgreens, Raphael's avant-garde fusion of Korean and Italian flavors, Jordan's technically perfect but emotionally empty beef Wellington. Victor and his assistant sat at a long table, clipboards in hand, expressions ranging from bored to hostile. Daniel carried his plate forward and set it before them. "Braised short ribs," he said simply. Victor did not look at the food immediately. Instead, he looked at Daniel with something that might have been curiosity or might have been contempt. "Tell me, Daniel," Victor said, "did you use that wooden relic to make this?" "Yes, sir, I did. Despite my clear concerns about sanitation, the spoon is perfectly clean, sir. I maintain my equipment." "But you used it anyway." "Yes, sir." Victor picked up his fork. His assistants waited, watching him for cues. He cut a small piece of the short rib, ensuring he got meat, vegetables, polenta, and sauce on the fork. He brought it to his mouth. The kitchen was silent. 27 candidates held their breath. Victor chewed slowly, his expression unreadable. He swallowed. He set down his fork. He looked at Daniel for a long moment, and something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. "This is competent," Victor said finally. "The meat is properly braised. The flavors are balanced. The technique is adequate." He paused. "For a diner, for a small-town restaurant where people have no other options. But it is not special. It is not art. It is exactly what I expected from someone self-taught. Comfortable, safe, boring." Daniel felt the words land like blows. Around him, other candidates shifted uncomfortably. Raphael looked away. Victoria studied her fingernails. "Sir," one of the assistants said, the lean man with the sharp nose, "I disagree." Everyone turned. Victor's head swiveled toward the assistant with visible surprise. "Excuse me," Victor said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. The assistant, whose name was Thomas, stood up. He walked around the table to stand beside Daniel's plate. He cut another portion, tasted it, closed his eyes. "This is not boring," Thomas said. "This is honest. There is a depth here that most of the other dishes lack. The short rib is cooked with understanding, not just technique. The sauce has 7 distinct flavor notes. The polenta is perfect. This is the best dish presented today." Victor's face darkened. "You are overstepping, Thomas." "Perhaps," Thomas agreed. "But I have worked for you for 3 years, and I have never tasted anything in this kitchen that made me feel the way this food makes me feel. It reminds me why I became a cook." Another assistant, a woman named Claire, stood and tasted the dish. Then she looked at Victor with something like defiance. "He is right," Claire said softly. "This is beautiful." The atmosphere in the kitchen had changed, shifted, become charged with something Daniel could not quite name. Victor Rousseau sat very still, his hands flat on the table, his jaw tight. He looked at the plate, at his assistants, at Daniel. "You set me up," Victor said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "This was planned." "No, sir," Thomas said. "We are just telling the truth." Victor stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He walked to Daniel's station and began examining the workspace. He checked the cutting board, the knives, the pans. He opened the oven, checked the temperature gauge. He picked up the wooden spoon and turned it over in his hands, looking for something, anything, to justify his position. "Show me the recipe," Victor demanded. "I do not have it written down, sir." "Then tell me." "Every step." Daniel did. He walked Victor through the process, explaining each decision, each technique, each small adjustment that made the dish what it was. As he spoke, he realized something. This was not just his mother's recipe. It had become his own, transformed through repetition and love and the lessons learned in a dozen different kitchens. When he finished, Victor was quiet. He set down the wooden spoon very gently. "How long did you care for your mother before she died?" Victor asked, his voice different now, stripped of its theatrical cruelty. Daniel blinked at the unexpected question. 18 months, sir. Did you cook for her? Every day, even when she could not eat. Especially then. I would make small portions, things that might tempt her appetite. Soup, soft bread, things that smelled like home. Victor nodded slowly. He turned to face the room, addressing all the candidates. "I built my career on the belief that cooking is about transcendence," he said, "about taking diners somewhere they have never been. I looked at this young man and saw everything I have trained myself to dismiss: informality, sentimentality, lack of proper credentials. I mocked him because I thought I knew what he represented." He gestured at Daniel's plate. "This dish is a mirror," Victor continued. "It shows me that I have confused sophistication with substance, that I have mistaken presentation for truth, that I have become so concerned with being impressive that I forgot to be nourishing." He turned back to Daniel. "Your mother's wooden spoon is not unsanitary. It is sacred. Every mark on it is a lesson. Every use has added to its story. You cook with it because it reminds you that food is not about ego. It is about connection." The kitchen was utterly silent. Daniel felt tears threaten and pushed them back, refusing to cry in this place before these people. "I apologize," Victor said simply. "I was cruel. I was wrong. You are the most talented cook in this room, and I nearly dismissed you because you did not fit my preconceptions." He extended his hand. Daniel, after a moment of stunned hesitation, shook it. "The mentorship position is yours," Victor said, "if you will accept it. If you can forgive an old fool who forgot why he started cooking in the first place." Daniel looked at Victor Rousseau, this man who had humiliated him, mocked his mother's memory, dismissed his worth, and then had the courage to admit his mistake publicly. He thought about his mother's letter, about fighting with love, about grace under fire. "I accept," Daniel said. "Thank you, sir." The applause started slowly, then built. Victoria was crying. Raphael was grinning. Jordan looked stunned. Thomas and Claire were both smiling. Even the other assistants, who had been silent throughout, were nodding approval. Victor kept holding Daniel's hand, not shaking anymore, just holding, his eyes bright with something that might have been regret or might have been recognition. "Teach me," Victor said quietly, just for Daniel. "Teach me how to cook like that again, how to put heart back into the work." "I will try, sir," Daniel said. "If you will teach me how to turn heart into art." Victor smiled, and this time it was genuine. "Deal." Later, after the other candidates had left, after the kitchen had been cleaned and the lights dimmed, Daniel stood alone at his station. He held his mother's wooden spoon, running his thumb over the copper wire she had wrapped around the crack, feeling the smoothness of the handle worn by years of use. He thought about miracles. Not the dramatic kind from ancient texts, but the small ones that happen in kitchens and conversations, in the moments when people choose grace over pride, connection over cruelty, truth over comfort. He thought about how his mother had taught him to see these moments, to recognize them, to honor them. The spoon was just wood and wire, but it was also a bridge between past and present, between loss and hope, between what had been and what might yet be. It was a reminder that the best things we carry are often the simplest, worn smooth by love and use, cracked but not broken, holding together because someone cared enough to repair them. Daniel slipped the spoon into his pocket, close to his heart, and walked out of Pinnacle Culinary Studios into the November evening. The city lights sparkled in the cold air. 3 buses waited to take him home, but he did not feel small anymore, or out of place, or unworthy. He felt like someone who had been seen, truly seen, by a man who had spent years looking without seeing. He felt like someone whose mother's wisdom had proven stronger than mockery, whose faith in love had outlasted cynicism, whose wooden spoon had changed a kitchen. That is the real miracle, he thought. A miracle. Not dramatic intervention, but the quiet transformation that happens when we choose to see each other truly, when we honor the sacred in the ordinary, when we remember that every meal is a gift, every encounter an opportunity, every moment a chance to practice grace. The world is full of Victor Rousseaus, people who have forgotten why they started, who confuse credentials with competence, who mock what they do not understand. But the world is also full of second chances, of moments when pride cracks and truth floods in, of wooden spoons that carry more wisdom than any culinary degree. Daniel boarded the first bus. He sat by the window and watched the city pass, thinking about the months ahead, the mentorship, the kitchen where he would learn and teach in equal measure. He thought about the dishes he would make, the techniques he would master, the ways he would honor his mother's memory by becoming excellent without becoming cruel. He reached into his pocket and touched the wooden spoon one more time. Then he pulled out his mother's letter and read it again in the dim bus light, her words a benediction. Make something beautiful. He had. He would. He always would, with or without validation, with or without witnesses, with or without the approval of celebrity chefs who had forgotten what cooking meant. The bus rumbled through the night, carrying Daniel toward home, toward tomorrow, toward a future built on the twin foundations of humility and skill, of knowing your worth without needing others to affirm it, of fighting battles with love instead of force. The wooden spoon rested against his heart, warm from his body heat, silent but speaking volumes, cracked but unbroken, ordinary but miraculous, a relic of love in a world that too often forgets that love is the point. That has always been the point. That will always be the point. The end.